This is from a voter in Somersworth. This is for both candidates, and we'll start with Jackie on this one. Same-sex marriage was recently approved in New Hampshire. Since the public opinion polls show a contrary opinion, would you try to repeal this law?
There are two categories of decisions that we're called upon to make in the legislature. One is a decision that affects every single person in our state. And those decisions, I do my absolute best to understand, to keep my ear to the ground and understand how people feel about it so that I carry that message to Concord. And, you know, when it comes to taxes or spending, I'm out in the communities every single day of the week. You know, I've had people tell me that there's nobody that served this district that is as present as I am and is listening as much as I am. I have friends from Caleb's Country Store here tonight. Don't mind giving you a little plug. You know, I don't walk into that place without asking how everything's going and how they feel and are their jobs secure. So I'm constantly monitoring that. So those are decisions that affect everybody. Then there's another category of decisions, and those are what I term civil rights. From the day that I ran for office, I left no doubt in anybody's mind. I stand for the civil rights of our citizens. And if we had been taking polls, and if we had done a popularity contest about it, our African-American colleagues would still be in the back of the bus. And so as long as I'm in this office, I will stand for the civil rights of our men and women throughout New Hampshire.
Thank you, Jackie. Fenton, your answer to that question?
Yes. I believe that marriage should be between a man and a woman. My record shows that pretty clearly. I also believe that this is something that should be allowed to go to the people as a constitutional amendment for marriage, and I would love to see that happen, and I would support that if I'm elected. I do not believe that this is a civil rights issue. There are many areas that are. I fully support those that are. I do not believe this is a civil rights issue. So I am fully in favor of bringing this to the people, allowing it to go to the people, and let them decide. In 31 states, they have gone to the people, and they have decided, and in 31 states, the people have decided that marriage is between a man and a woman. Now, just commenting briefly, again, on Senator Cilley's figures on the general fund budget. She has mentioned that she doesn't take her numbers from any place else. She speaks her own. It's very interesting that many of the numbers she has did come from an article in the Sunday paper that Mark Fernald wrote, and it's pretty nearly identical to what she has said. But on this particular number, in order to get to the 1%, there were $248 million of normal operating funds that were taken offline and no longer showed as general fund expenses. And so those numbers that were taken offline, and I'll include a couple of them, it's $91 million of liquor store expenses that were taken offline. Now, the previous budget carried $80 million of budget of liquor store expenses that were in the general fund budget. So when you take those offline, you've reduced the general fund budget by $80 million. In addition to that, we borrowed $91 million, not restructured debt, folks, not restructured debt. We borrowed $91 million for school construction aid that normally comes out of the operating budget. When you borrow it, not only does it make the budget look balanced, but the other thing it does, it takes it out of the operating budget and makes it look like there was a lower operating budget. When you put that $248 million back in, and another area that was included in offline money was $41 million that was borrowed to pay interest on previous borrowing. Okay? So kind of like putting your interest on your credit card back onto your credit card. When you put that back in, it was the general fund was a 6% increase.
Okay, just a note to the candidates, so we can move along with the different topics and the different questions. We want to keep the answers and the time limited to the question itself, and then we'll just move on. Jackie?
Then maybe we could end with this. This is from the New Hampshire Public Policy Center. And as much as I admire Mr. Fernald and did take a look at his numbers, have a couple of others with me tonight and would cite them as such. I cited those numbers out of our public policy. So I really hate to be corrected when I know what I've got with me.
Okay, very good. Next question is directed from a resident in Somersworth. It's for Fenton, and it says, your website states you have a firm resolve to limit and reduce burdensome and job-killing regulations. How would your decision-making affect the Department of Environmental Services regulatory programs? And you have 3 minutes.
Very good. I'll give you a very specific example of that, and I want to first of all state that I am a firm advocate of regulations that provide clean water, that provide us with clean air, and that provide us with the pristine lakes and rivers that we have. In most cases, regulations, as time goes on, regulations become more and more stringent, and sometimes more so than is needed. And sometimes there's just simply a need to restructure the regulations with no change in the outcome, just a significant reduction in cost. So I'll give you very briefly one of those examples. We built our first 2 homes in Maine in the last year. We discovered that the septic system approval process, not the septic system itself, but the approval process, took about 4 days, less than 4 days in Maine, and cost us less than $400. Total septic system approval process. In New Hampshire, that same process takes us 21 to 30 days and costs about $1,900, $1,500 difference that's added to the cost of every home with a septic system in New Hampshire. Now, the outcome, the septic systems were virtually identical. The control of making sure they were put in right was fully as rigorous in Maine as it is in New Hampshire. In addition to the cost to the home buyer of $1,500 additional in New Hampshire, it takes 15 to 25 people at the Department of Environmental Services, DES, additional to run New Hampshire's system versus Maine. I happen to think that when a system costs $1,500 more, takes 21 to 30 days instead of less than 4 days, and takes 15 to 25 people more, there's a good reason to change that without any negative impact on the environment. That's the kind of changes I'm looking for, and that's what I would do.
Jackie, you have a minute if you'd like to respond to that or answer that question as well.
Thank you very much. Our Department of Environmental Services gets about $26 million, which, if you look at our total budget, is a drop in the snow. That leverages tens of millions of dollars for the state of New Hampshire and for many of our municipalities. It might be that in Maine things cost a little less because they've got a sales tax and an income tax, and they've got inventory taxes. I know we've got a friend up there that every truck, costs money on that's sitting on his property. So I suppose if we had that kind of money floating around, perhaps some of our services could be done more cost effectively or more, at a different rate. Plus, I think Maine has an awful lot more folks that work for them. So.